Article 82EI, and pillaging, Article 82EV.
You've been listening live coverage from The Hague and the International Criminal Court. Its spokesperson Laurence Blairon announcing that, in fact, the court has issued an arrest warrant for the president of Sudan, Omar Al-Bashir. And as you heard there, 7 counts. He was already charged with these back in 2008 in the summer, but 7 counts of crimes against humanity and war crimes, all in conjunction with the campaign of genocide in Sudan's Darfur region. He was the first sitting head of state to be charged by the court, and now the first arrest warrant issued for a sitting head of state. We have some immediate reaction for you. Professor Payam Akhavan is a former United Nations prosecutor. He is now an international law professor at McGill University in Montreal, and he has been watching this case very closely as it's unfolded. Professor, first of all, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And thank you very much for being here. I'm anxious to hear your view. You have just heard it as we had live on our program, the breaking word from The Hague. What is your reaction to the arrest warrant being issued for Omar Al-Bashir?
Well, my first reaction is that it's not a surprise, given the overwhelming scale of the atrocities that have been committed in Darfur since 2003. Some 300,000 civilians have been murdered. About 3 million have been forcibly displaced. There has been widespread use of rape against women. So the fact that the court found that there is sufficient evidence at this preliminary phase to find that there's reasonable grounds that the allegations are well-founded is not surprising. My second reaction is that this is highly significant development in the history of the International Criminal Court. It's the first time ever in the history of that institution that there is an indictment against a sitting head of state. And the message that it sends is that the fact that you're head of state does not give you immunity from prosecution for such crimes. And the third point that I think bears emphasizing here is that this is the first time ever that the international community has taken a decisive stand against the atrocities committed by the Sudanese government in Darfur. 15 years after the Rwandan genocide, where we failed to act, although we knew what was happening, we're repeating the exact same mistakes in Darfur. And the arrest warrant issued by the International Criminal Court for the first time sends the message to President Bashir and other Sudanese leaders that there will be a cost attached to committing these crimes.
As significant as it is to have this arrest warrant issued, the question becomes, will he ever appear before the court? So in terms of next steps, we watched him yesterday just laugh, essentially, at the arrest warrant, at the prospect of having the arrest warrant issued. What effect, if any, will the arrest warrant have on him?
Well, the mere prospect of the arrest warrant has already had an effect. Ever since the prosecution's announcement in July that he intends to issue an arrest warrant, the Sudanese government has arrested the Janjaweed leader, Ali al-Koshayb, to pretend at least that Sudanese courts are prosecuting these crimes, therefore obviating the need for the International Criminal Court to exercise jurisdiction. We know that just in February there was a so-called confidence building and peace agreement with one of the rebel groups and President Bashir, and these steps are clearly the result of the pressure that has been created by this impending arrest warrant. President al-Bashir now is going to be transformed from a head of state to an international fugitive, and even if he's not immediately arrested, his political fortunes are going to decline dramatically. He can no longer represent Sudan on the international stage, and even within Sudan, his power is going to decline as a result of his isolation. And we know from the case of Radovan Karadzic in the former Yugoslavia that sometimes it may take, in his case, as long as 13 years to arrest a fugitive. But the fact that that person is no longer able to participate effectively in political life, it itself begins to send a message, essentially, that crime does not pay, or in this case, crimes against humanity do not pay. And you cannot commit ethnic cleansing and expect the international community to legitimize it and accept it.
Do you expect at any point that that pressure on him will become so great that others in the government, for example, would ever turn him in, or that he would even turn himself in?
Well, the record so far of the international community on pressuring Sudan has been quite dismal. On the one hand, the UN Security Council has referred the case to the International Criminal Court, but it has taken no steps whatsoever to pressure Sudan into compliance. And we know from the case of another sitting head of state that was indicted by the Yugoslav War Crimes Tribunal, Slobodan Milosevic, that if the message is sent that, for instance, participation in international financial institutions and other core interests of the government will be conditioned on compliance with an arrest warrant. We see from the case of Slobodan Milosevic that a Serbian government that was even hostile to the UN War Crimes Tribunal did ultimately surrender him. And I think the same goes for the Sudan. If the Sudan understands that is trade and economic relations and other fundamental political interests will be compromised if it doesn't cooperate, then I believe that in due course President Bashir will be surrendered to the International Criminal Court.
And one more question before I have to let you go. I'm speaking to you not just as a professor, but also, of course, in your capacity as a former United Nations war crimes prosecutor. If you were back doing that job, if you were prosecuting this case, what would your first, now that you have the arrest warrant in hand, what would your first course of action be?
Well, I think that, first of all, this is an ongoing investigation. And the crime base is so vast that we should not assume that this arrest warrant is the really end of the process. In effect, it's the beginning of the process. But as a prosecutor of a court that doesn't have its own police force, that doesn't have an army of occupation that can simply go and arrest the accused, you have to rely on the cooperation of governments. And one of the first courses of action that I would take as a chief prosecutor would be to lean heavily on the members of the Security Council that in the first instance referred this case to the court and basically hold them to their word. If they refer this case to the International Criminal Court, now they have to make sure that the government of Sudan receives the clear message that if it does not cooperate, there will be consequences for its interests.
Professor, thank you so much. I've enjoyed very much your sharing your expertise with us on this morning on the breaking news out of The Hague. And that's Professor Payam Akhavan from Montreal this morning.